is having on patients. Then, are vehicles equipped with driver assistance tech creating more problems than they solve? And what voters are saying about the economy in a key swing state on the CBS Evening News.
At the CBS Evening News, we focus on solutions, finding solutions to healthcare problems, how much money we can spend on groceries, finding solutions to help people understand what are the right choices to make for you and your family.
President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump won enough delegates to become their party's presumptive nominees in yesterday's primaries.
We have to win an election, and we should win it by a lot, because there's never been anybody worse at doing that job than Joe Biden.
MAGA Republicans and Donald Trump want to pass a national ban on the right to choose. Well, hear me loud and clear. Not on my watch.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington, and welcome to a special hour-long edition of America Decides. America is, if anything, a consumer-driven society. Every company caters obsessively to consumer wants and needs. Few do this better than TikTok. 2 billion global users and 170 million here in the United States. Today, the House of Representatives, by a gaudy bipartisan margin, passed a bill to ban TikTok if its Chinese parent company, ByteDance, doesn't divest itself from TikTok. Ban an app used by 170 million American consumers? How will that go over? Speaking of consumers, as of today, the major party nominees for the presidency are set. Joe Biden, born in 1942, Donald Trump, born in 1946. As you know, for months and months, large majorities in our country, consumers, if you will, have said the same thing over and over and over. Please, no rematch. We don't want a rematch. And yet, here it is. On Sunday, as you might recall, the Oscar for Best Picture went to Oppenheimer, a movie about the atomic age, a technological breakthrough roughly as old as Biden and Trump. Notably, around the time that Trump and Biden were toddlers, a rarity happened. A political movie won the Oscar for Best Picture. It was called All the King's Men. It's a story about a populist reformer who becomes a ruthless and corrupt authoritarian. Early in the movie, this budding politician at the center of the story gets some advice about how to win over voters. Quote, appeal to their emotions, make them laugh, make them cry, make them mad, even if they get mad at you. But for heaven's sake, don't try to improve their minds. Something to consider as we think about banning TikTok and commencing a general election. Caitlin Huey-Burns is here with me at the desk, and Nancy Cordes is on the road covering President Biden in Milwaukee. Caitlin, let me start with you. This has been an important week for former President Trump and the Republican National Committee. Why?
Well, now the Republican National Committee is essentially the Trump campaign. Trump's top picks to lead the RNC, including his daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, have been voted in by the RNC. And this week, the RNC laid off upwards of 60 staffers. And advisors have told me that this is part of the Trump campaign melding with the RNC. Now, there are huge structural infrastructure advantages for Trump to assume that, especially as Trump's campaign is facing a cash crunch, and so too is the RNC. I have been talking to Republicans, however, who are concerned about what this may mean for down ballot races, efforts to take over in state parties and the Senate and House members, too. If all of this is focused on Trump, what does that leave for these other candidates?
Now, you and I are both experienced with this. Presumptive nominees usually have a lot of sway over both national parties, Democratic National Committee, Republican National Committee. But this sounds something more intrusive, like getting people out, laying them off, replacing them, in theory, with Trumpists. That takes time, effort, and it makes the RNC much more focused on Trump and maybe potentially less focused elsewhere.
Exactly. And you're exactly right. I mean, as is the nominee's right to have in place leaders that they want. However, this is different because this has been billed as an extension of the campaign, one and the same with the campaign. That is how they're positioning it. They're not shy about that at all. And these layoffs that we've seen are part of that restructuring. But I think what's also important here is that we know that this is Trump's party. This is the official kind of realization of that. But there's also this concern within the RNC about money being raised for Trump's legal fees. And there's going to be an amendment coming up to vote on just that.
Nancy, I want to go to you in Milwaukee. I know you enjoy, as I did when I was at the White House, getting outside of the White House bubble, meeting voters. I understand you had a chance to talk to some in Milwaukee. Give us their perspective.
I did, Major. I was able to sit down with a trio of voters here in Milwaukee. One who is undecided. He is a 33-year-old barber here. He voted for Biden last time, and he's not sure what he's going to do this time around. One, a business owner who is all in for Biden. Another who is a project manager who's all in for Trump. And interestingly, they agreed on a number of issues. They were all leery about more spending on Ukraine and foreign aid. They all agreed that President Trump should stay away from any suggestion of a national ban on abortion, be it at 15 weeks or 16 weeks. And they all agreed that the economy was a huge issue for each of them. Take a listen to a little bit of what they had to say. When it comes to inflation, how much of it do you attribute to the after effects of the pandemic, and how much of it do you attribute to President Biden's policies?
It's been years now since the pandemic. I'm not buying that anymore. At first I did. I'm not buying that anymore because yogurt is still going up in price. I'm not buying that anymore.
How about you?
I'm still buying the pandemic because we're still getting the aftermath. It's just a lot of things still happening since the pandemic.
Interestingly, you know, we've asked voters time and time again about their feelings about the economy, and various polls show that they're not feeling that great about it, even as some economic indicators continue to improve. But here in Milwaukee, both that cafe owner I spoke to and a barber said that actually they are feeling the improving economy. Things are getting better for them, even as prices remain high, Major.
Nancy, did it come up in the conversation at all, any anxiety or even low-level concern about the physical or mental ability of either President Biden or former President Trump to handle the rigors of the job should they win in 2024 this year?
Yes, in fact, they basically told me that their concerns about both of these candidates kind of cancel each other out because they're worried about both of them. They're so close in age, 77 and 81. They worry about their physical health. They worry about their mental health. In fact, one of them made the point that that's why it's more important than ever that they give the vice presidential candidates a second look, because it's possible that one of them might have to move into the top job. And one of the voters I spoke to said that they wished that at his recent physical, President Biden would have gotten a cognitive test, even though his doctors said that they didn't think he needed one.
Caitlin, I want to bring that up with you. Do you think that is going to be, and have you experienced that in your conversation with voters, this idea that, yes, there are these general concerns, but also, therefore, a heightened focus on Kamala Harris and whomever former President Trump picks as his running mate?
Yeah, and this was a huge focus of Nikki Haley's campaign.
Right,
she explained that, in her view, she was running against Kamala Harris as much as she was running against Biden, and obviously she was running against Trump as well. You know, voters that I've been talking to at these political events, not at Trump events, because they are very much focused on the top of the ticket, and they believe that the vice president that he picks should be someone who is fully supportive of him. But there is this anxiety about that and what they actually are voting for.
Nancy, I want to ask you about Wisconsin, because this is a time for both campaigns to begin laying the groundwork on the ground. And as I understand it, the Biden campaign is doing that while the RNC is laying off people and trying to hire new ones.
Yes, President Biden, one of the things he's going to be doing while he's here in Wisconsin is opening up one of his main campaign offices. Democrats here in Wisconsin will argue to you that they don't necessarily need to be reorganized because they've been organized all along. There was this very animated race, you'll recall, for a member of the state Supreme Court. Abortion was at the heart of that race, and that kept particularly Democratic and progressive voters very, very engaged in politics here, and they remain so today. And this was such a close state, Major, as you know, in 2020. President Biden only won it by about 20,000 votes. And that's why the president, you're going to see him so many times back here in Wisconsin. He's going to Michigan tomorrow, part of this blue wall, this trifecta of states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, battleground states that'll be so critical to his reelection effort.
Caitlin, any timetable from either the Trump campaign or the RNC about trying to build out ground operations?
Well, they believe that they are going to start that now, that they are kind of one entity. But I think what we should point out is that there is a lot of work to do financially, especially. These are two cash-strapped operations. And also, when you look at results from last night in the primaries, in Georgia, for example, Republicans have been pointing out all day that Nikki Haley, who dropped out of the race a week ago, still did very well
13%,
in the suburbs of Atlanta in particular. And that had been, what she was trying to say. And so Republicans are really concerned about that and need the infrastructure to be able to reach those voters.
Caitlin Huey-Burns here with me at the desk. Nancy Cordes on the road with President Biden in Milwaukee. Thank you so very much. Next, we will hear from both the Biden and the Trump campaigns on what they believe will be keys or the key to a possible victory. You're streaming America Decides.
For the good of our nation, it is time for Crooked Joe Biden and myself to debate. We have to debate. It's for the good of our nation.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
If China invades Taiwan, what will the U.S. Navy do?
Here in Tel Aviv, second siren in about 10 minutes.
This Humvee just pulled up and said, it's time to leave.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Stories start with the who, what, when, and where. But it's why it's important to you that matters most. Knowing what to ask is how you open the door to a deeper understanding. See you on Primetime, streaming free everywhere.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
An original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely.
As Taiwan faces threats and aggression.
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, they are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme.
Record-breaking storm surge and devastating wind.
Every second counts.
The mud punched a hole right through the wall.
See, hear, feel the forecast. Tonight on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
Welcome back to America Decides. Full hour today. Isn't that exciting? Biden campaign is taking a close look at some comments made earlier this week by former President Trump, suggesting he's open to cutting so-called entitlement programs. That would include Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Biden campaign senior spokesperson Kevin Munoz joins us now. Kevin, always good to see you. Lots of bipartisan budget analysts, as you well know, Kevin, have said that for the future of Medicare and Social Security and their solvency, some adjustments need to be made. But you don't agree, and neither does the Biden campaign. True?
Well, look, thank you for having me on, Major. What we're talking about is the lifeline for America's seniors. We're talking about their hard-earned benefits that they have paid into for decades. And they need a president that is focused on fertilizing these hard-earned benefits. The president has brought forth plans to increase the solvency of both programs, not someone that's willing to put them on the chopping blocks. They don't want somebody from Park Avenue that doesn't understand the pain of working people. And that's why we're telling Americans across our battleground states with more than 13 events about the risk of a Donald Trump presidency, not just to your Medicare and Social Security, but to all of your hard-fought, hard-earned freedoms and rights.
And extending that solvency would be achieved by raising taxes on the wealthy, correct?
Yeah, look, the president has been clear time and time again that the ultra-wealthy, the corporations in this country, they need to pay their fair share. We know that the middle class and working people sometimes pay higher tax bracket than the richest in this country. That's just not the American way, and that's what President Biden is fighting for.
Kevin, I want to read to you something I came across in The Hill today. Quote, President Biden didn't see a bump in polling after his State of the Union address last week, with new polls showing no improvement for the incumbent. It continues. Ahead of the State of the Union, Biden's approval rating was 40% in a Yahoo News YouGov poll. In a new survey released Tuesday by the same duo, the president's approval rating had fallen to 39%. If the State of the Union address can't do it, what will?
Well, it's funny, actually. A colleague of mine just showed me a poll that has us up one, and it was conducted right after the State of the Union. We're going to look at the full range of metrics that indicate how we can win this election. Joe Biden is running on an agenda that wins Democrats up and down the ballot time and time again of cutting costs, creating opportunity, fighting against the national abortion ban, which is the hallmark of Donald Trump's campaign. But we're also looking at things like the fact that we raised $10 million alone in the 24 hours after State of the Union. That is real enthusiasm for the president. They know the stakes of this election, and that's exactly why we're getting Joe Biden out across the country to talk to the voters who will decide this election, not just about the danger of Donald Trump, but what Joe Biden is doing to fight for you and your family.
Kevin, the graphics organizers for this show, as they often do, just read my mind. I want to talk to you about our new CBS News polling out of Georgia. Let's bring those numbers back up again. It shows former President Trump leading 51% to 48% over President Biden. Margin of error, notably in that poll, 3.9%, so it's in the margin of error. How seriously concerned are you about the president's status in Georgia?
Well, I think it's really important to know, Major, and you know this better than most, Georgia is a close state. It was in 2020, it was in 2022, and it absolutely will be close in 2024. What we are going to do is not ask, but earn the support of the coalition that sent us to the White House from Georgia, like we did in 2020. And what we saw last night in those primaries on the Republican side, I think some 60,000 or so Republicans voted against Donald Trump. That is 60,000 voters that do not want him to be reelected and are opportunities for Joe Biden to pick up in a state that we won by 11,000 votes last time. So look, it's a hard state. We're putting in the work. You saw the president there last weekend talking to the diverse coalition that is critical in the state. And on the other side, you have Donald Trump, who attacks Haley supporters. Today announced that they're doing no outreach to communities of color. It couldn't be further from the story that we're telling on our side.
Kevin, the former president has said that he wants to debate the president anytime, anywhere, under any conditions with any moderator. Will the president take him up on that?
I think it's really funny that Donald Trump keeps saying things from Truth Social when he just stays in the basement of Mar-a-Lago. I don't think he's done any campaigning this week while the president's been out there. But look, Major, the president is traveling the country, talking to the voters who will decide this election. We haven't had the conversation about something that may happen in August, but what I can say is the debate plays out every time Joe Biden talks about what he is fighting for and what Donald Trump is fighting for, which is bad, it's rejected, it's toxic, and it's not the American way.
Kevin, looking at the electoral map from 2020, can you identify a state that candidate Biden lost that President Biden will win in 2024?
Oh, look, we're going to be competing in the critical states that sent us to the White House back in 2020, but we absolutely see opportunity. And I think look no further than a state like North Carolina, where the Republican gubernatorial candidate has openly mused about attacking political opponents, literally with violence, who has said that women shouldn't vote, that has been a part of some of these insurrection conversations that have been very repulsive to swing voters. So this is a state where we're going to be talking about the full suite of the issues on the line. North Carolinians know the impact of MAGA Republican leadership that took away women's rights, and that's why you've seen us really investing heavily in that state so far.
The consensus, Kevin, is that Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia are probably the three states in which the president is currently most vulnerable. Of those three, which concern you the most?
I think we feel really good about the opportunity we have, not just through the Rust Belt, not just in North Carolina, but on these Sun Belt states like Georgia, like Nevada, like Arizona, where the president's agenda is making a real impact on economic opportunity. These are states, Arizona and Georgia, where abortion rights are very much on the ballot. And these are states where MAGA Republicans continue to run candidates that run absolutely counter to the values of their population. So look, every state is going to be close. Our country is divided, and we need to put in the work to talk about who is fighting for Social Security, who is fighting for addressing gun violence, who is fighting for the middle class. It's only Joe Biden.
Kevin Munoz, as always, thank you.
Thank you, Major.
Now let's turn to the National Press Secretary for the Trump campaign, Caroline Leavitt. Caroline, good to see you. A couple of news items before we get to politics. Today in Georgia, 6 of the 41 counts brought by the Fulton County District Attorney were dismissed against former President Trump and some of the other co-defendants. Your reaction?
Yes, well, President Trump's legal team, who is the best in the business, put out a statement earlier today saying that they feel as though the judge made the right decision on the basis of the law, dismissing 4 of these counts against the former president in Fulton County. However, we also strongly believe that this case in its entirety should be dismissed, not just for the alleged unethical misconduct waged between Nathan Wade, the lead prosecutor in this case, and Fani Willis herself, but also on the basis of the law. So we will continue to fight for truth in this case, and the president believes that he will be exonerated of all of the charges that are being brought against him.
Caroline, does anything that happened today suggest anything to the campaign about what may happen on the pending matter before the judge about the continuance or lack thereof of District Attorney Fani Willis?
Well, we'll have to see what the judge decides. However, we have said and strongly believe that Fani Willis is in no position to bring this case forward based on the allegations made against her and also on the basis of the law. There is no legal grounding for this case, and President Trump's team has said that from the beginning.
The House of Representatives, as you well know, Caroline, today passed with a rather large margin a bill that would effectively ban Tik Tok. If that bill were to reach President Trump, should he be reelected, would he sign it?
Well, that bill will likely be heading to President Biden's desk if it makes it to the Senate, so that's a question for him. However, on the issue of Tik Tok, President Trump in 2020 took very strong action via executive order because he believes that Tik Tok is a national security threat to the American public. The president also understands that this is a wildly popular app used by millions of Americans across the country to create content. And so he wants legislation that will protect the privacy, security, and data of all Americans, but will also ensure that we can have American ownership of this company and divest from Chinese ownership to ensure that millions of Americans can still use the app. He'll defer to Congress on the details of how that gets done, but the president certainly wants to see a solution that works for all Americans.
But just to be clear, if he were president and this bill were before him, would he or would he not sign it?
I will not comment on the merits of this specific bill. What I will say is that the president believes TikTok does pose a national security threat. He wants to see the privacy and the data of all Americans protected, and he wants to see the app still be able to be used by millions of Americans across the country.
Today, Janet Yellen, in an interview with Fox Business Channel, said she regrets saying in 2021 that inflation would be transitory. Your reaction?
Well, we've seen that Janet Yellen and Joe Biden and the Biden White House, their tax and spend policies and their hike of the federal interest rate has led to the worst inflation crisis in generations. Prices are still 20% higher than they were when President Trump left office and Joe Biden took office. The jobs report from last month was not good for Joe Biden's administration. Inflation rose once again by 3.1%. And so Janet Yellen is, of course, walking back her comments and her claims. Whether inflation has gone down, that's what the Biden White House is claiming. Overall, it doesn't mean much to the American voter, who is still spending thousands of dollars more every single year just to have the same quality of life as they were under President Trump's leadership.
And I know you know this, Caroline, but the White House didn't raise interest rates. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates. Earlier this week on CNBC, when asked about entitlements, former President Trump said there is a lot you can do in terms of cutting. That's a direct quote. Was he advocating in that response for cuts in the future to entitlements?
No, absolutely not. And thanks for giving us the opportunity to clarify what the president said. He was referring to cutting waste, fraud, and abuse that we've seen plague America's entitlement programs, including Social Security and Medicare, for far too long. The president has always said he will protect Social Security for hardworking seniors across this country. He did it in his first term. He will continue to strongly protect Social Security benefits in his second term.
Does that also include Medicare and Medicaid?
Absolutely.
Okay. I want to read you something I came across today from Axios. Democrats' advantage among Black, Latino, and Asian voters is at its lowest since 1960, Financial Times columnist and chief data reporter John Byrne Murdoch found by analyzing a massive set of polling data. Caroline Levitt, from your perspective and the Trump campaign's perspective, is that a permanent state of being?
Yes, absolutely, because all Americans, Hispanic Americans, African Americans, independent voters, women are realizing that their lives are worse off today than they were under President Trump's leadership. We had a secure border under President Trump. Now we've had a border crisis. Nearly 10 million illegal immigrants have come into this country under Joe Biden's administration. We had peace around this world under President Trump. Now we've seen Russia invasion of Ukraine. We've seen Iranian-backed terrorists in the Middle East launching brutal attacks on our friend and nation ally Israel. And President Trump's economy was booming, both pre and post-pandemic. Now we've had the worst inflation crisis in a generation. All Americans are feeling the consequences of Joe Biden's policies, and that's why he's losing his base. He virtually does not have a base left, and it's why President Trump is in the strongest position to win than he ever has been since 2016.
Very quickly, Caroline, in Georgia yesterday, even though it was effectively over and everyone knew it, 87,273 participants in the Republican primary voted for someone not named former President Trump. Does that in any way worry the campaign, and is there going to be an outreach to those disaffected Republicans still not on board?
We welcome all Republicans, independents, and even disillusioned Democrats to join President Trump in this fight to save our country. He is now the Republican nominee of the Republican Party, and we are 100% focused on defeating Joe Biden so we can restore peace and prosperity and safety to America. This is a binary choice on November the 5th. If we want to continue the chaos and the destruction that have been created by Joe Biden's policies, then he's your guy. But if you want to secure our southern border, bring peace around this world, and rebuild our military and our economy, then President Trump is the only option.
Caroline Levitt, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Major.
Our team of energetic campaign reporters have been covering the presidential primaries for months. Next, they will open their notebooks, and share their insights. You're streaming America Decides.
Donald Trump has a different constituency. Here's a guy who's kicking off his general election campaign on the road up with Marjorie Taylor Greene. He can tell you a lot about a person who he keeps company with.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7. It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
This is CBS.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. With the presumptive nominees for each party now settled, this will be one of the longest general election campaigns in American history. Isn't that swell? It's around 8 months, if you're checking the calendar, until President Biden and former President Trump face off in November. The results from the primaries, however, give us some clues as what to look for in the coming months. Olivia Rinaldi, Nydia Cavazos, Torian Small, and Aaron Navarro join us now. Olivia, we'll start with you. Your takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, I was covering former President Donald Trump throughout the primaries and now on to the general election. And just to say that his grip on the party is perhaps stronger than ever. Even after 8 years, even after everything that has gone on in the last Trump administration and how he left office, Republicans still are looking to him for guidance on everything from abortion to Tik Tok, especially as that bill passed today. So really showing that the Trump effect is still there and focused. You know, he showed historic leads in the polls as well, really consolidating the Republican Party in an early fashion and showing that he still has some viability going into the general election. Even we're seeing polls where he's leading in places where he had never led before, that he's leading Biden now, where compared to 4 years ago, he wasn't, and he was never leading in any poll compared to Biden. That shows me that Trump still has a lot of viability and strength going into this general election.
Nydia, your thoughts?
Well, you know, it's been exactly a week already since Nikki Haley dropped out of the presidential race, but she hasn't been exactly completely out of the picture. And this is what we saw yesterday in Georgia. Despite the fact that she's out of the presidential race, over 77,000 voters still ended up selecting her. So what this means is that she was able to chip away some support from former President Donald Trump. But what this also means is that, you know, while this didn't necessarily hinder Trump from clinching on the party's nomination, nor from winning the state's Republican primary. What this means is that it'll matter down the line when he's facing a rematch with President Biden, because this all plays into the grand question and central question of where do Haley's voters go to? And they have the potential to sway elections one way or another. We're talking about many of Haley's voters who, even though they just prior to Super Tuesday, even though they knew that there was high chances of Haley not necessarily making it through doing clinching the Republican Party's nomination, they were still very much undecided. And a lot of the answers that we would get and just hear over and over on the campaign trail and across different states, it was if Haley didn't necessarily make it, some of them were going to choose to just sit this election out. So the grand question is, do voters choose to stay within the Republican Party, even though it means supporting former President Donald Trump, and that's not necessarily what they're looking for? Or are they willing to switch political parties and support President Biden?
Torian, lessons learned for you that may influence the outcome in November?
I think it's quite clear that both Biden and Donald Trump are focusing on battleground states moving forward. So what I'll be watching is how they both plan to build this coalition. So for Biden, we saw in 2020, he targeted some of those Midwest states, but also some states that were unlikely going to lean Democrat, like Georgia, where he won just narrowly by 12,000 votes here. In Michigan, that was just over 20,000. And in Pennsylvania, it was over 80,000. In Wisconsin, 20,000. This is a game of margins, and Biden is going to have to find a strategy to defend those voters, keep them within his base moving forward, because just a few thousand leaving could be fatal to his campaign.
Aaron, same question to you.
Hi, Major. From covering the Biden-Harris campaign in recent weeks and talking to Democratic voters on the ground in these battleground states, it's clear that they're not necessarily thrilled about the Trump-Biden rematch, but that doesn't necessarily mean they will stay home or that they think Trump will beat Biden this fall. I got a sense, especially on the ground from the more diehard Democrats that are seeing the president speak this early in the cycle, cautious optimism that Biden can pull it out again. But I have heard, especially in states like Wisconsin, where I am now, Michigan and Pennsylvania, that they wish that there was an alternative option, a younger Democrat they could vote for. But when I ask if they'll stay home, they say absolutely not. Keeping Trump out of office is a priority for these voters. But one other thing I'm watching, can the Biden-Harris campaign rebuild the winning coalition they had in 2020? You've seen in our own CBS News polling some waning enthusiasm with Black, Latino, other minority voters in terms of their support of President Biden. Younger and progressive voters have been making their discontent with the president known through this uncommitted vote as a way to kind of protest his response to what's happening in Gaza. Do these voters stay home in November? Do they believe that abortion and democracy is a bigger issue than the economy, immigration, or foreign policy? And that will be key for President Biden and his campaign to address going into this rematch with former President Trump this November.
Olivia Rinaldi, Nidia Cavazos, Torian Small, and Aaron Navarro, we thank all of you so very much. Former President Trump's campaign is shifting focus, of course, to the general election, but he still has plenty of time left to be in courtrooms. We'll take a look next how the former president will try to balance both the campaign and the courthouse. You're streaming America Decides.
Joe Biden should not be shouting angrily at America. America should be shouting angrily at Joe Biden.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go. You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going. The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
an original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
It can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education.
Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome back to America Decides. A judge in Fulton County, Georgia, today dismissed 6 charges in the state's election subversion case. The judge ruled that charges related to soliciting public officials to break the law lacked the required detail. The main racketeering indictment, however, remains intact. Andrew Weissman and Melissa Murray join us now. They co-authored a new book, The Trump Indictments, the Historic Charging Documents with Commentary. Melissa, let me start with you. What is the import of today's ruling about the Georgia racketeering case?
Sure, Major. This is obviously a setback for the prosecution, but it's not necessarily a devastating one. The judge essentially said that while the prosecution pled the essential elements of the crime, they didn't fill in the necessary details. So it could be the case that the prosecution could go back to the grand jury, provide that necessary detail, and the grand jury could issue a superseding indictment here. It does leave, as you say, the RICO charges, the racketeering charges intact. And that really was the bulk of this sprawling prosecution. As we note in our book, this is an indictment that has a lot of color, a lot of detail. So we actually thought it was quite surprising that Judge McAfee thought that there wasn't the necessary detail here, because we thought this was an indictment that was long on details.
So, Andrew, if I hear Melissa correctly, this should not be precisely a celebratory moment for the Trump legal team.
That's right. They might spin it that way. And of course, no prosecutor ever likes to have any charges dismissed before getting to trial. But in terms of substance, they still have a lot of options. They could just decide, you know what, we don't really need those counts. And also, the judge actually invited them to go back to the grand jury and what's called supersede. That is to add sort of the necessary detail to those charges. Again, I don't think that it was really lacking that much detail, but it would be the kind of thing that would be relatively easy to cure. It is also important to note that the judge then, by not dismissing the rest of it, is saying those charges are good to go. So, if the defense is thinking that they're somehow going to be able to knock those out, the judge isn't saying that.
Melissa, I want to ask you, if there's a way to place a hierarchy of the cases facing former President Trump in terms of import, evidence, facts, and law, how would you establish or order that hierarchy?
Well, in our book, we really tried to sort of figure out what this hierarchy would be. But I think in the end, what we were left with is that they're all actually quite significant. I mean, I think everyone is focused on the January 6th election interference case that was filed in the District of Columbia. That's Jack Smith's case. That's obviously really important. It's obviously intertwined with Fani Willis's Fulton County case, which also speaks to the question of election interference and a broad, widespread conspiracy to subvert the results of a validly conducted election. But the Mar-a-Lago documents trial is also really important because of the sensitive classified information at stake. And then, of course, Alvin Bragg's Manhattan DA case concerning the hush money payments is also really important because it sort of sets up an earlier form of election interference, the idea of sequestering certain information from the voting public in order to enhance one's ability to win an election. So I think they're all quite significant. We had a hard time ordering them.
Andrew, in the court of public opinion, it is perceived that the Alvin Bragg case in Manhattan is a bit of a leap. It is a novel application of prosecutorial discretion. How do you come down on that?
Well, we actually addressed that in detail in the book that Melissa and I wrote, because that's actually wrong. So first, the misdemeanor charges of just filing false business records, that's the bread and butter of what the Manhattan District Attorney's Office does. That's a standard charge, so there's nothing unusual about it. The only part that's unusual is when you charge it as a felony, and there are numerous ways in which that can be justified. The court actually ruled on pretrial motions brought by Donald Trump saying that those shouldn't be allowed, and the judge disagreed. 3 of the 4 theories that we sort of articulate in the book are ones that the judge said are going to go to the jury. And obviously, it still remains for Donald Trump to be tried. He's entitled to the presumption of innocence. The government obviously has to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt as to each element. But there's nothing novel about the theory that is being used in this case, according to the trial judge in this case.
Melissa, you raised the January 6th case, and something in your book really caught my eye, and this goes to the issue of, was the Justice Department and its attorneys and investigators sufficiently aggressive on a January 6th type of case? History will render its own judgment about that. But Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, you write, came as a surprise to the Department of Justice. What does that tell you?
So again, as you say, it was a concerted choice to go with the rank and file members of that January 6th effort to overturn the election at the Capitol, to prosecute those lower level offenders before going for those at the top. The court of public opinion is going to play out on that decision, I think, for at least the next 10 years or so. What we thought was so surprising about Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, and what we noted in the book, was that we were surprised that it left the Department of Justice sort of on the back foot. Like, they weren't anticipating it. And again, you know, the real heroes here really are the January 6th congressional subcommittee that decided to hold these public hearings, solicited this information, and again made it public, forcing the department's hand in many ways.
Andrew, I'd like you in our last minute to address a kind of meta issue. For the former president, he's counting on 2 things: the shock of these indictments giving him a political lift, and that's clearly happened in some instances, and the delaying tactics that preserve that political lift up until the election. Is there any way the judicial system can counteract either one?
Well, yes, it can, by actually having a trial. You know, the way that we decide disputed issues in this country like this is to have a trial where facts and law matter. What's surprising here is you have the prosecutors saying we are welcoming this day in court. We want to give this day in court to the defendant. We are welcoming that we have to do this and win by proof beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest standard that we have in the law. And you have a defendant saying, I don't want to do that. I do not want my day in court. I want to do it after not just the general election, but essentially never. And that is an unusual thing, whereas you said this is one where I think Donald Trump would like this to play out with sort of spin and adjectives and adverbs, but not actually being in a forum where facts and law matter.
Andrew Weissman and Melissa Murray, thank you very much for your time. We're all smarter for it. After the break, our John Dickerson will join me to discuss the kickoff to this general election. You're streaming America Decides.
His policies, man, cruel and ineffective. He separated families.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. and reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's attacking? Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.
Prime Time with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
Welcome back to America Decides. As we've been discussing, President Biden and former President Trump are now able to shift their focus to the general election. Don Dickerson joins me now from Studio 57 in New York. That means the galaxy is now in proper alignment. I'm back here in Washington, D.C. John is back in New York. I know everyone is relieved at that reality. John, let's talk about something that is on your mind. It's on my mind every single day. The former President of the United States said on his first day in office, should he be reelected, that he will pardon the, quote, January 6th hostages. Diagram that language and its historical import, if you'd be so kind.
Well, these are people who attacked the carrying out of a free and fair election, the centerpiece of democracy, and they went through the legal system, and
either were convicted or pled.
Right. They were convicted or pled. Exactly. And so they have been through the system. So this is both a double attack. It is a rewriting of the history of what happened. These are people who attacked the government in order to take the vote away from 81 million people who chose Joe Biden. That was the first offense. And the second is that it's an attack on the judicial system, which adjudicated these cases and found them guilty, or they pled. So two pillars of democracy. One is free and fair elections, and the other is the rule of law. And Donald Trump is promising on the first day to essentially attack both of those, which is not a new thing. For anybody who is endorsing Donald Trump this time around, they know that this is what he does because he's been in one form or another doing it since he lost the election in 2020, which changes something about this election. These endorsements are not people who don't know what Donald Trump is up to. This is now the position of his party to be in support of these two things, which kick the legs out from under a functioning democracy.
John, this week and in the next week, we will be marking all sorts of 4-year anniversaries since the onset, the clear, unmistakable onset of COVID-19. Talk to me about your thoughts on that and the rigors of the presidency.
For me, COVID-19 is one of the key truths about the presidency. Stuff surprises you as a president. And so if you know that going in, you need to build a team that can handle surprises, and you need to have a relationship with the country built on at least some high level of trust so that when the surprise comes, you can give clean, clear information to the American people. It is a great way to test for the attributes of the two men running to be president, to see whether they have the attributes to handle a surprise. And Donald Trump is the one who was in office when this happened 4 years ago, and the marks are not good. And the key distinction is not just about mistakes made in a good faith effort to attack the pandemic. The challenge for Donald Trump is to explain why, when he knew tests were not available, he told the public anybody who wanted one could get one. When he knew it was more severe than the flu, he said that it was not. When he knew China was not telling the truth, he said China had it in hand. The COVID crisis group, 32 experts who spent months studying what happened, said that Donald Trump was a comorbidity in COVID-19. That's a challenge for him to explain why he did a good job handling a surprise when experts say he didn't.
In the minute we have left, John, the importance of having an 8-month general election campaign?
I take guidance from you. We had an internal meeting, and you said the benefit of having that much time is that we in the press can do our job putting the issues in front of the American people. They're going to be both candidates trying to talk about how the other is awful. What I see in a long election is a chance to tee up for the public all of the most important issues, not just the questions of democracy, but American opportunity, foreign policy, which has got a host of challenges. It is an election in which we can, in fact, interrogate all of the most pressing questions in front of the public if we all don't get distracted by what is likely to be a pretty nasty campaign.
Nothing I like better than John Dickerson to quote me from a Zoom call internally here at CBS News. John Dickerson, thank you so very much, sir. We'll see you around.
I was paying attention.
And you can see more of John Dickerson, and who doesn't want to do that, at 7 p.m. Eastern for Primetime with John Dickerson. Well, I'm happy to say that does it for today. We'll be back with another outstanding edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. You know this. Just a quick reminder, you're streaming CBS News.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government?